I'm Shahar Azani, and in the news, Dubai 2020 Expo and celebrating the one-year anniversary to the Abraham Accords. The Dubai 2020 Expo was launched on September 30th, 2021. Israel's participation in the event is visible and celebratory, as is the Israeli flag over the pavilion, a signal of strengthening relations and the huge trade potential between both countries. And when you look at the numbers, they do tell you the story. Data from the Israeli Chamber of Commerce indicates that from January to July of this year, 2021, trade between Israel and the UAE came to around $270 million, almost 3 times more than the $94 million in all of 2020. Last week, the Knesset in Israel, Abraham Accords Caucus, convened for the first time. It includes over 100 members of Knesset. Jared Kushner, former senior advisor to US President Donald Trump, attended the ceremony, and he said that it's time to act and ensure the Abraham Accords fulfill their potential. Kushner founded the Abraham Accords Institute for Peace, along with American-Israeli billionaire Chaim Saban, and he attended the event last week in honor of the one-year anniversary of the peace and normalization agreements between Israel and Arab states, along with his wife, Ivanka. So, what does peace look like on the ground? And what more should and could be done to bring about peace in our region? To discuss this and so much more, I'm absolutely thrilled to have with us all the way from Israel on JBS my good friend Arsen Ostrovsky. Arsen is a leading international human rights lawyer. He's one of the most prominent voices in the pro-Israel community. He currently serves as chair and CEO of the International Legal Forum, the ILF, an Israel-based global network of 3,500 lawyers in 40 countries, leading the fight against anti-Semitism, BDS, terror, and the delegitimization efforts against the State of Israel. Following the historic Abraham Accords, Arsen has become heavily involved in a number of civil society initiatives promoting ties between Israel and the Arab Gulf states, including serving as a board member of Sharaka, an NGO working to promote people-to-people peace between Israel and Abraham Accords countries. He's currently based in the wonderful Tel Aviv. And if you really want to get a taste of the Holy Land, all you have to do is follow him on Twitter and social media. I assure you, it's a delight every day and especially on the weekends. Arsen, it's great to see you, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us on JBS.
It's always great to be with you, my friend Shahar. Hopefully next time together in person and in your beautiful, beautiful studios in New York.
Amen. We're waiting for you. So first, Arsen, let me dive into the issues. I want to ask you, first of all, about the ILF. Can you tell us a little bit about it and what you do? And what was your most recent campaign or initiative?
Sure, absolutely. Look, the ILF is essentially, it's a global network of lawyers and pro-Israel activists, some 3,500 around the world, over 40 countries, I think, as you mentioned in the introduction. And we're really committed to standing up for Israel, to standing up for the Jewish people, to fighting back against the lies, the delegitimization, the demonization, fighting back against the anti-Semites, the boycotters, those who seek to delegitimize the Jewish state, but we do so through the legal lens. As lawyers, we believe that the legal arena not only possesses a great set of challenges for us as a people and as a nation, but also presents a great deal of opportunities for us to go on the offensive, to not only we not only have to be able to respond in a rapid time, we also need to change the paradigm, to change the narrative, to go on the attack, to go on the offense. So we try and make sure that we stand up, speak out when it's counted, when it needs to be, and stand up for the rights of the Jewish people and the Jewish nation.
Tell us a little bit about one or two of your most recent campaigns or issues you were involved with in the ILF.
Sure. I think, look, the major one, and I think one of the most successful ones was we initiated a major anti-Durban campaign. Durban was, of course, the infamous anti-Israel, anti-Jewish hate fest in 2001 in Durban, South Africa, that really descended into some most hideous scenes of anti-Semitism, Holocaust distortion, apartheid slurs that you can imagine. And only last month, the UN under whose auspices, under whose eyes this was held initially, held a 20th anniversary celebration with world leaders and heads of state to be attending. So we really kicked into action. We had an entire campaign for months before this happened that included research, that included video, that included digital campaign, that included reaching out to European countries, calling on them, those who stand up and claim to stand up against racism, against discrimination, against anti-Semitism, to make sure they do not legitimize this hate fest, that they do not lend their name, do not lend any credence to this hate fest. That's the only way we can put it. And at the end of the day, some 38 countries withdrew from Durban. And the ones that were left were really the likes of Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, North Korea, all the major democracies, including the United States, Canada, Australia, and I think 3/4 of the EU nations, which is crucial to this, withdrew. So I think that was an important battle that not only we were proud to lead, but certainly with the pro-Israel community together to fight back and to speak loudly.
Right. We also extensively cover the issue, Durban, absolutely, as we call, infamy for posterity, to understand the lessons of Durban, not just on the 20th anniversary, but for many more years to come. And this is shedding light on the hypocrisy of international community, of the United Nations and other human rights organizations, is also part of your expertise, for we follow extensively your work vis-a-vis Human Rights Watch. And they're dealing with what's happening between Israelis and Palestinians. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. I mean, look, Human Rights Watch, despite its name, despite the name of the organization, has really nothing to do with human rights, certainly not when it comes to Israel. When it comes to this part of the region, they are essentially no more than, I think, a mouthpiece for Palestinian extremists, excusing crimes of Hamas. Really, their sole motivation, their sole mission is to single out, to delegitimize and to attack the state of Israel, to undermine our rights, to give a free pass to Palestinian terrorists. You will never or hardly ever hear them say one single word against Hamas, against the Palestinian Authority's brutality. They are solely obsessed with Israel out of all proportion. So it's something, again, those that pretend to speak in the name of human rights, I think we need to call them out when they fail according to their very own mission and standards. So we need to speak out and call them out.
And good for you for doing so, and very successfully, I might add. Now, to dive into the matter at hand today, the peace between Israel and Gulf states and normalization, a very important word in the relationship, I want to ask you, we've seen declarations, statements, White House lawn, signing ceremonies, but Arsen, as somebody who's very much not just on the advocacy level online and in the legal forum, but also on the ground, what does peace look like for Israelis, for you in Israel?
I can tell you a very short story. My first opportunity to meet a group of Emiratis and Bahrainis, they were in Israel about a year ago with the Shirako organization, and they were in Jerusalem at the time, and actually they were there taking part also in the Hanukkah celebrations. They'd just come from the Western Wall, where they actually lit a candle at the Kotel, group from the UAE, from Bahrain. It was incredible sight. And I went to join them for dinner that evening. And as I sat down, this is the first time, by the way, I've met them as an Israeli visiting a group visiting from the Gulf. And as I sat down with them for dinner, I noticed something quite incredible. As we're sitting down there, I'm observing, I'm watching, and I see them engaged in this really heated debate, discussion, arguments, very polite, but heated about all sorts of different issues. And in the middle of this dispersal, they're asking, can you pass me the bread? Can I get a little bit more water? And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? This could be any Shabbat table, anywhere in Israel, any Jewish family, anywhere in the United States, anywhere in the world. And so what really got me thinking was, you know what? They are just like us. They are just like us. Why did we not have this peace sooner? Why did we not have it before? And, I can tell you that, from my perspective, peace is very much, it's like a flower in the sense that politicians and diplomats, they're the ones that they plant the seeds of peace. But it's up to us. It's up to us as civil society, as educators, as leaders, as business people. It's up to us to actually make it grow, to make it flourish, to establish these bonds and connections, which I think is what we're doing on many levels, both through the ILF and with the Shirako organization, which I'm also very proud to be a board member of, because at the end of the day, I think what really and truly defines what we're seeing today, this peace between Israel and the Gulf and Arab nations, is that it's truly a warm peace. It's a genuine peace. And there is just this incredible, palpable sense of excitement, enthusiasm. You know, we had a year, the last 12 months, which was so challenging for so many people around the world, not least because of COVID and so many other reasons. But the Abraham Accords represent this incredible beacon of hope and optimism for a brighter, for a better future. So to be able to connect with our friends from the UAE, from Bahrain, from Sudan and Morocco, and God willing, hopefully many more countries to come soon. It's just an incredible blessing, and it's an incredible opportunity for the future, for the region, for all of us.
You know, your expertise kind of sneaks in between the words, because I want to just focus our viewers on hearing what you said, which is the essence of public diplomacy. They're just like us. This is what we aspire to achieve in people-to-people diplomacy, and it's incredible to hear it from your mouth. I want to ask you, how did you feel when the UAE Embassy launched, I believe a few weeks ago, a billboard campaign all over Israel and Tel Aviv, celebrating the peace in Hebrew between the two peoples? That's unique, isn't it?
In Hebrew and in Arabic as well. And by the way, if you watch and if you look at their social media channels, every post they make, they do it in Hebrew, in Arabic, and in English.
Wow.
Very, very smart. And I think it's very, very effective. Look, it was beautiful, it was powerful. And, you know, the words of, I don't recall the exact words, but they were so powerful and meaningful, but essentially said, you know, the future belongs to our children.
True.
Essentially, it's what they said. And it was such a meaningful and powerful and thought-provoking statement. It was one line, but it was so powerful. And at the end of the day, you know, what unites us, you know, behind the Abrahamic Accord, it's not just our shared faith and history behind Abraham, but it's also our shared hope for a better future for our children, to know that we are not enemies, to know that we are brothers and cousins and family. Right. The people from the Emiratis, they are like family to me now. And to them, I can tell you, and this was perhaps, you know, what really struck me when I knew how real it was in May, when we had obviously the very difficult period here with the rockets, with the war with Hamas. I found myself in the shelter with my children. You know, the first people to reach out to me and ask, "Are you okay?" The first people, they're my friends from the Emiratis.
Wow.
The first ones to message me to ask, "Are you okay?" I cried after that. It was something so raw, so real. And that at the end of the day is, you know, defines this relationship in so many ways. It is just real. It is sincere. The first, if I may, the first Emirati that I met, incredible man by the name of Majid Al-Sara, has become a very, very dear friend of mine. And this was still sort of COVID time. And as I'm going to meet the delegation, meet the group, and to meet him, he came downstairs. I didn't know, how do we meet? What do you say? How do you open the discussion with someone you maybe only met online? Do you do a fist bump, elbow bump? Do you not? Do you shake? What do you do? And you know what? We looked at each other and we just embraced.
Incredible.
Before we even said a single word, we just hugged and embraced. And it was just the most natural thing, the most beautiful thing, the most sincere and honest and raw. And honestly, that is the way it ought to be, and that is the way it is.
Such great news to hear from Israel. People to people, heart to heart. You mentioned Sharaka, partnership in Arabic. You're a board member of the organization. Tell us a little bit about the organization and what you aspire to achieve.
Shirako was started by a number of civil society activists, young leaders from Israel and the Gulf, really immediately in the wake of the Abraham Accords. I think once the news broke, a number of activists here from Israel, including my colleague Amit Deri and a number of others, went to the UAE. They met with their colleagues and they said, we have to capitalize on this opportunity. We have this incredible foundation, this incredible news. We have to do something with it. So that essentially is how Sharaka was born. And as you said, it means in Arabic, partnership. So its goal is really quite simple, powerful, but simple. It's to serve, to act as a bridge, to facilitate peace, people-to-people peace between civil society and young leaders in Israel and the Gulf. And that has taken shape in so many incredible forms. Like I said, last year, we brought the first ever civil society delegation from the UAE and Bahrain. We just brought a group just from Bahrain a few weeks ago. They've toured the country, from going to Yad Vashem, which we can talk about, was such an incredibly moving experience for them, to meeting with President Rivlin, to going to the north of the country and seeing the threats posed by Hezbollah, by Iran, which they very well understand. They have met with civil society organizations here. They've walked the streets of Tel Aviv, and you've seen them. They are like superstars. Israelis are coming to them. They're taking pictures. They're embracing them. They're taking selfies. They've seen Israel as a startup nation, the full spectrum of the country of society. And likewise, we've taken groups to the Gulf as well, because at the end of the day, it's really by meeting each other, by seeing each other's country, by talking and seeing and understanding that we can really, I think, embrace each other and build on this incredible foundation of peace.
It's exciting. I want to ask you about the political climate, this time in Israel. You were talking about the Israeli excitement vis-a-vis the peace with the Arab Gulf states, but there was an incident in the Knesset during the session with Jared Kushner, where that delegation from Bahrain, reportedly walking in the corridors of the Knesset, encountered an Arab Israeli member of Knesset by the name of Aida Tuma Suleiman, a woman. And according to the reports, she looked at them with contempt, and some would even say spitting to the side, disgusted supposedly by this warm-up of relations between Israel and the Gulf. What is your reaction to that kind of attitude, and where does it emanate from?
Look, I can tell you the reaction of the group was, for them, it was just a passing instance. They certainly did. If they did not let it bother them, I'm not letting it bother me either. Look, it was unfortunate, but it also underscores, there are some elements that just don't want peace. It's as simple as that. They do not want peace. They do not want to see Israel prosper. They do not want to see Israel succeed. And they reach out when they see that. They speak out, and that is unfortunate that there are some negative elements like that are out of spite more than anything else, will reject this for no reason than because Israel is at peace. And I think that only really underscores their motivations and their goals. But I can tell you the group was certainly they met with Israeli politicians and leaders from across the political spectrum, from the government, from the opposition. They attended the ceremony, as you mentioned, the one marking the one-year anniversary with the Kushners as well. So they were embraced by not just the Israeli political, diplomatic echelon, but most importantly, by people on the street who saw them, who embraced them, who wanted to talk to them, who wanted to show them, who wanted to take pictures with them. So I think that's really the most important thing.
Yes,
and they certainly didn't let a few rotten apples, deal with it.
Exciting. Absolutely correct. I want to ask you something in a historical perspective. We have seen the emergence of relations with parts of the Arab world also in the mid-90s. With the signing of the Oslo Accords, we remember the opening of Israeli missions in Morocco and elsewhere, but these withered away with the coming of the Second Intifada. Here, with these agreements, it's been a year. It's already been able to weather the change of Israeli Prime Minister. We have seen many members of the new government visiting visiting the Gulf states. Very, very exciting. We've seen a new American president, and the relationship keeps on blooming. So my question to you is, how durable do you think this agreement is this time? Do you think it's going to be able to withstand and weather incidents of flare-ups with Hamas in Gaza or elsewhere, tensions in the region? What's your take on this?
I think this has all the ingredients for a durable peace, a real peace, and a warm peace. It took Israel, some 72 years for two peace agreements with Arab countries, Egypt and Jordan. And then last year, in the space of 72 days in one summer, we had three peace agreements with the UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, and since then with Morocco as well. So I think what really differentiates those agreements with these ones, I think it's the real people-to-people peace, the cultural peace. We have, normally when you have the opening of diplomatic agreements, as you know very well yourself, being a former outstanding diplomat and spokesperson as well. These things normally take time. They work in an incremental level, but this has really been at a turbo pace. We have seen, I think, something like $750 million in trade already between Israel and the UAE, and that is just the tip of the iceberg. They're predicting over $1 trillion in trade in the coming years. We have seen MOUs signed from across the spectrum in aviation, in water, in cybersecurity, in tech, in COVID cooperation. We've seen embassies open. We've seen direct flights. We've seen delegations and educational missions and cultural groups. It's really just been at an exponential rate. But I think really what's been underpinning it and what gives me such incredible sense of confidence in the future, it really is that that dialogue between people, that warm peace. We have already, the war with Hamas happened in May. We not only withstood that, but I think it made us stronger because some of our best activists, I should say some of our best advocates, were our friends from the Gulf who very openly, not only in English, but in Arabic, they called out Hamas. They call out Iran. They stand with us. And by the way, in as much as they stand with us and they call out our enemies, I think it's imperative that so too do we stand with them as well, because Israel is certainly a country that is very much maligned in the international community, very much sense of ignorance to what is happening here. I think that applies in many ways to a number of countries in the Gulf. You mentioned Human Rights Watch. Human Rights Watch, by the way, hates not only Israel, they hate the UAE now as well. So I think in as much as they stand with us, we need to stand with them, and we are standing with them. And I think that only gives me a great sense of hope and excitement for the future.
That's the incredible work you also do with Sharaka and elsewhere to promote the people-to-people connection, which leads me to my last question. What would be your recipe, which was hinted to in your answer now, to warm up the older peace agreements that Israel has with Egypt and Jordan? What would you do? What would you want to do to make sure it's as palpable and enjoyable as the ones we have with the Gulf states?
Look, there are a number of levels, certainly on the political side as well as on a ground level. I would love to be able to visit these countries. Likewise, I would love to see more groups and delegations and trips and people coming from Jordan, coming from Egypt. I think there's where we are warming up with the Egyptians, with the Jordanians. We share a lot of strategic concerns, a lot of strategic threats in the region that are mutual threats. There's also incredible scope for cooperation in trade, not only in things like water and energy, but in many other areas. But at the end of the day, what's working between Israel and the Abraham Accords countries, it's the people-to-people connection. And we need to have more of that with Jordanians, with Egyptians as well. And I hope in the coming years, certainly we will do that. We are working on that now. And I think, God willing, there'll be only more countries that will enter the Accords. We're certainly working on that, and I think it's an exciting future, Shahar, and we're living in certainly incredible days, incredible times, and there's a lot of hope, a lot of enthusiasm, and I think it's something that we all need.
You know, Arsen, some people complain when they watch the news, they get depressed and it brings them down. Speaking with you not just brought a smile to my face, but to so many people who are listening to you and viewing this show today. I'd like to thank you for your stand, for your advocacy, for your activism for Israel. I urge all of our viewers to follow you, to really understand what's happening on the ground. You are, Arsen, not just a great friend, but a unique voice in the pro-Israel community. And thank you for all that you do for Israel and the Jewish people. I look forward to having you here in studio in the Big Apple.
Thank you, Shah, and I look forward to being with you in person again, my friend. Thank you.
Lastly, to our great viewers, I'd like to leave you with some food for thought. Arsen has taught us so much about what's happening on the ground, showed us that peace is not just possible, it's happening before our very eyes. Israelis and Arabs all over the region are joining hands, and they do so for the sake of both people's future. Yet, on the Israeli-Palestinian front, the conversation still revolves around BDS, anti-Semitism, and animosity. The Palestinians and their allies around the world have chosen to focus on a negative discourse with Israel and with Israelis, which has left them behind with all of the progress taking place today. The Israeli pavilion at the Dubai Expo is just a short distance away from the Palestinian one. So yes, maybe the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is yet to be resolved, but the time has come for the Palestinians to adopt a different approach, a more realistic and fruitful one with Israel, and to enjoy the economic benefits that come with it for the sake of the Palestinian people and for the sake of Israel. I hope they will see this as an encouragement to do so and be done with the futile and unrealistic hallucination of getting rid of Israel, for all of our sakes. As we always say, peace can only come from Jerusalem and Ramallah, not Stockholm, Geneva, or New York, not even Twitter. I'd like to thank you all for watching, and to all we say, stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy. I'd like to thank our director, Sloan Copeland, JBS's managing director, Dara Golob, our technical manager, Michael Paley, transmission manager, John McDevitt, and to our wonderful producer of In the News, Carol Lilienthal. For JBS, I'm Shahar Azani. Until next time, see you soon. Shalom and lehitraot.